Every morning, Mrs. Rodriguez drove the same route, picking up 35 kids for Lincoln Elementary. The children knew her as the patient bus driver who never raised her voice, even when they were rowdy. Until the day a military helicopter made an emergency landing near their school, and the pilot stepped out, saluted Mrs. Rodriguez, and said 6 words that left everyone speechless. "Colonel, thank you for saving my life. Welcome to Hidden Lives." Before we begin this incredible story of hidden identity and quiet heroism, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe extraordinary lives like this deserve to be uncovered. Hit that subscribe button and help us reveal these hidden stories. In the small Texas town of Cedar Grove, Lincoln Elementary's yellow school bus made the same route every morning at 7:15 a.m. Bus number 47 had been driven by 52-year-old Maria Rodriguez for 8 years. With her black hair always pulled back in a neat bun and kind brown eyes, Mrs. Rodriguez was one of the children's favorite drivers. Every morning, she'd pick up the children waiting at their stops and greet them with, "Good morning, babies." Tommy Henderson, 10 years old, always liked to sit in the front row. Sarah Williams, 8 years old, was the little girl who tried to do her math homework on the bus. Jake Martinez, 12 years old, was the rowdiest kid on the bus, but he never disrespected Mrs. Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez's most notable quality was that she never raised her voice. When children fought, she'd calmly say, "That's enough, children," and everyone would immediately quiet down. When someone got hurt on the bus, she'd pull first aid supplies from her bag. When snowstorms blocked roads, she managed to calm the children and get them home safely. For 8 years, Mrs. Rodriguez had used the same route and knew the children's families well. Tommy's father, Mark Henderson, worked as a mechanic at the local garage. Sarah's mother, Linda Williams, worked at the town library. Jake's grandmother, Rosa Martinez, sent him homemade cookies every Friday. The only thing people talked about regarding Mrs. Rodriguez in town was that she had moved to Cedar Grove alone 10 years ago. They knew she wasn't married and had no children. She lived a simple life, didn't get too close to anyone, but was extremely reliable at work. Principal Johnson praised Mrs. Rodriguez. 8 years, never late, never sick, never a complaint from parents. But Mrs. Rodriguez had some habits that made the children curious. Every morning before getting on the bus, she'd look up at the sky, not just to check the weather, but as if she was searching for something. When using her radio, she sometimes spoke in codes they couldn't understand. And strangest of all, whenever she heard a jet engine, she'd always pause and start scanning the sky. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Tommy had asked one day, "why do you always look at the sky?" Mrs. Rodriguez had smiled. "Just checking the weather, honey. Always good to know what's coming." But Tommy sensed this wasn't just weather checking. There was something different in Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes, as if she was looking for something specific in the sky. On a cold Saturday morning in November, everything changed. Lincoln Elementary was hosting a special event, the science fair. Mrs. Rodriguez was volunteering to help carry children's projects and set up stands. Around 10:30 a.m., while children were displaying their science projects with their families in the schoolyard, a loud helicopter sound began coming from the sky. At first, no one paid attention, but the sound was getting closer and louder. Children began looking up at the sky. It was a dark green military helicopter, and it was clearly having problems. Smoke was coming from its engine, and it was tilting to one side. "Everyone inside!" "Now!" shouted Principal Johnson. But Mrs. Rodriguez didn't move. While other adults rushed children toward the school, She continued watching the helicopter in the sky. The helicopter was beginning to descend toward the schoolyard. Mrs. Rodriguez moved quickly, but not in panic, in an extremely organized manner. She took out her phone and dialed very quickly. Her conversation didn't sound like a normal emergency call. Tower, this is Ghost. We have a Black Hawk down at coordinates 32.7157, 96.3451. Need immediate medical and fire support. ETA 2 minutes. Confirm clear LZ. No one understood what Mrs. Rodriguez was saying, but her tone was completely different. She was no longer the gentle school bus driver, but someone with authority giving precise orders. The helicopter made a hard landing in the open area of the schoolyard. The engine stopped, but smoke continued coming from the cockpit. Mrs. Rodriguez ran toward the helicopter. While other adults tried to keep children inside, she approached the helicopter alone. The cockpit door opened, and a young pilot struggled out. He was wearing a helmet and flight suit but looked very pale. He needed help getting down to the ground crew. Mrs. Rodriguez ran toward him. "Sir, are you injured?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. The pilot looked at her. At first he seemed confused. Then his eyes widened, as if he'd seen a familiar face. "Ma'am, I'm okay, just shaken up. Engine failure. Had to make emergency landing." Then the pilot looked more closely at Mrs. Rodriguez. He began to notice certain things: her posture, the way she spoke, how she handled the emergency. "Ma'am," the pilot said with a mixture of respect and surprise in his voice, "have we met before?" Mrs. Rodriguez stopped. There was a long silence. Around them, fire sirens were approaching. School staff was watching curiously. Children were looking from windows. The pilot suddenly remembered Mrs. Rodriguez's face from old photographs, training files, stories he'd heard from flight school. "Oh my God," the pilot said breathlessly. "Ma'am, you're Colonel Maria Rodriguez. You're Ghost." Mrs. Rodriguez's face became expressionless. It was a name she hadn't heard in a long time. The pilot immediately stood at attention. He brought his hand to his forehead in a military salute. "Colonel, thank you for saving my life." These words echoed across the schoolyard. The crowd that had gathered around fell silent. Principal Johnson approached in confusion. Children continued watching from windows. "Son," Mrs. Rodriguez said calmly, "I think you have me confused with someone else." But the pilot insisted. "No, ma'am. Colonel Maria Rodriguez. Call sign Ghost. You flew F-16s in Afghanistan and Iraq. You saved my squadron leader, Captain Davis, in 2018. We studied your missions in flight school." Mrs. Rodriguez looked around. The crowd was growing. Children, parents, teachers, everyone was watching them. "Pilot," Mrs. Rodriguez said in a low voice, "we'll talk about this later." Ambulance, fire department, and police arrived. The helicopter was brought under control. The pilot was taken to the hospital for a checkup. But the damage wasn't major. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Principal Johnson approached Mrs. Rodriguez. "Maria, what was that all about?" Mrs. Rodriguez shrugged. "I think the young man was confused. Adrenaline can do strange things." But Principal Johnson wasn't satisfied. The way Mrs. Rodriguez handled the emergency, her conversation on the phone, her interaction with the pilot. This wasn't the behavior of an ordinary school bus driver. That afternoon, the incident was the only thing talked about in town. Children went home and told their families. Tommy Henderson told his father about Mrs. Rodriguez's conversation with the pilot. Sarah Williams told her mother about how she controlled the helicopter situation. Jake Martinez told his grandmother about how Mrs. Rodriguez gave military commands. The following Monday morning, Mrs. Rodriguez came with bus number 47 as usual. She picked up the children, greeted them with her usual smile. But now the atmosphere was different. The children were looking at her differently. Mrs. Rodriguez, Tommy said as he sat in the front seat, "Why did that pilot call you Colonel?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "Sometimes people get confused, honey. I'm just your bus driver." But Tommy and the other children now sensed that this wasn't just confusion. There was something different about Mrs. Rodriguez. There always had been, but they hadn't noticed. In the following days of that week, investigations began in town. Several parents tried to learn more about Mrs. Rodriguez, but they didn't share what kind of information they found. Only their behavior toward her began to change. More respectful, more careful. On Friday, while Tommy's father, Mark Henderson, was working at the garage, his customer, Bill Thompson, an old soldier, came by. Bill had heard about the Mrs. Rodriguez incident. "Mark," Bill said, "I did some checking. If that pilot was right, if she really is Colonel Maria Rodriguez, do you know who she is?" Mark shook his head. "Tommy's bus driver." "No, Mark. Colonel Maria Rodriguez, call sign Ghost, is a legend in the Air Force. First Latina woman to lead combat missions in Afghanistan. She has over 200 combat flight hours, shot down 2 enemy aircraft, saved countless lives. She was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart." Mark's mouth fell open. "Are you sure?" "I looked it up. She disappeared from active duty about 10 years ago. Nobody knows why. But if she's here, driving a school bus, there's got to be a story." That evening, Mark went home and told his wife. The next day, Sarah's mother, Linda Williams, began researching at the library. Jake's grandmother, Rosa Martinez, started asking questions to her veteran neighbors. Slowly, Mrs. Rodriguez's true identity began spreading throughout the town. But strangely, no one asked her directly, as if they wanted to protect this big secret. 2 weeks later, Veterans Day was approaching. Lincoln Elementary would hold its traditional Veterans Day assembly. Local veterans would come to school and talk to children about their service. Mrs. Rodriguez was volunteering to help as usual, setting up chairs, hanging decorations, preparing for tea and coffee service. She would sit in the back rows with other school staff. That day, one of the speakers was Brigadier General Robert Mitchell. He was a respected and experienced commander with a 30-year career. He had served in Afghanistan and Iraq. He was talking to children about courage, service, and love of country. "Young people," General Mitchell was saying, "freedom is not free. It's protected by men and women who put their lives on the line for their country. Some of these heroes are well known, some remain in shadows, but all of them deserve our respect and gratitude." General Mitchell was continuing his speech, but suddenly his eyes caught the back of the school auditorium, the section where school staff, bus drivers, cafeteria workers were sitting. And there, among the others, he saw a simply dressed woman. General Mitchell stopped his speech and looked more carefully. This face seemed familiar, very familiar. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Mitchell said, putting down the microphone. "Excuse me for a moment." Confused murmurs started among the audience. General Mitchell left the stage and began walking toward the back of the auditorium. Principal Johnson, teachers, parents, children. Everyone was watching in confusion. General Mitchell came to the row where Mrs. Rodriguez was sitting. Mrs. Rodriguez tried to stand up, but General Mitchell raised his hand. "Ma'am," General Mitchell said loudly enough for the entire auditorium to hear, "Colonel Maria Rodriguez?" Mrs. Rodriguez remained silent, but she stood up. General Mitchell stood at attention and saluted. "Ma'am, it's an honor to finally meet the pilot they called Ghost." The entire auditorium fell silent. Children, parents, teachers, everyone held their breath. "General Mitchell," Mrs. Rodriguez said calmly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No, ma'am, there hasn't," General Mitchell said. "I know exactly who you are. I've studied your missions. I've read your reports. You're one of the finest pilots the Air Force has ever produced." General Mitchell turned to the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, children, it is my honor to introduce you to a true American hero. Colonel Maria Rodriguez, better known by her call sign Ghost, served our country with distinction for 15 years. She flew over 200 combat missions, saved countless lives, and earned some of our nation's highest military honors." The audience was in shock. Was this ordinary, humble school bus driver really a war hero? Mrs. Rodriguez was still standing, uncomfortable but respectful. General Mitchell continued, "Colonel Rodriguez led one of the most dangerous rescue missions in Afghanistan in 2018. Under heavy enemy fire, she flew her F-16 into hostile territory to provide air support for a trapped convoy. Her actions saved 23 American soldiers." The children were now looking at Mrs. Rodriguez with different eyes. Tommy, Sarah, Jake, all were in shock. "Ma'am," General Mitchell said, turning to Mrs. Rodriguez, "would you mind sharing a few words with these children?" Mrs. Rodriguez, after a long pause, nodded. She slowly walked toward the stage where the microphone was. With each step, the auditorium became even quieter. She reached the microphone. She remained silent for a long time, looking at the children's faces. "Children," she finally said, "my name is Maria Rodriguez. You know me as your bus driver. That part hasn't changed." Pause. "Yes, I used to be a pilot in the Air Force. I served my country for 15 years. I'm proud of that service, but that's not who I am today." Another pause. "Today, I'm Mrs. Rodriguez, your bus driver. I take care of you every morning and every afternoon. I make sure you get to school safely and get home safely. That's my mission now." Tommy raised his hand from the front row. "Mrs. Rodriguez, why didn't you tell us?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "Because, Tommy, what matters is not what we used to be, but what we choose to be today. I chose to be here with you, taking care of the most important cargo in the world, children." Sarah also raised her hand. "Were you really a hero?" "Sarah, everyone can be a hero. You don't need to fly fighter jets to be a hero. You can be a hero by being kind to your classmates, by helping someone who's hurt, by standing up for what's right." Jake asked, "Do you miss flying?" Mrs. Rodriguez paused. This was a harder question. "Sometimes, Jake, flying is amazing. But you know what's more amazing? Watching you grow up, seeing Tommy help younger kids on the bus, watching Sarah share her snacks with friends, seeing you stand up to bullies. That's better than any flight I ever took." The audience began standing and applauding. Children, parents, teachers, everyone was applauding Mrs. Rodriguez. But she was still the same humble, calm woman. General Mitchell took back his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what real service looks like. Colonel Rodriguez could have any job she wanted. She could work for aerospace companies, defense contractors, airlines. Instead, she chose to drive a school bus. She chose to serve by taking care of our children. After the assembly ended, Mrs. Rodriguez tried to leave quickly, but it was impossible. Parents, teachers, children, everyone wanted to talk to her. Mark Henderson approached. Mrs. Rodriguez, I want to thank you, not just for your military service, but for taking care of Tommy all these years. Linda Williams added, we had no idea. You've been hiding in plain sight. Rosa Martinez, Jake's grandmother, hugged Mrs. Rodriguez. Mija, you are a treasure. We are lucky to have you. But Mrs. Rodriguez found all this attention uncomfortable. Please, she said, I'm still the same person. I'm still just your bus driver. Principal Johnson approached. Maria, we need to talk. In the office, Principal Johnson began asking questions. Maria, why didn't you tell us? We could have used your background, your experience. Mrs. Rodriguez sat in the chair. Because I wanted a quiet life. I wanted to serve without the spotlight. But why a school bus? You could do anything. Mrs. Rodriguez looked out the window, saw the playground where children were playing. 10 years ago, I lost my squadron, 8 pilots under my command. We were ambushed. I made a decision that didn't go well. 2 of my pilots didn't make it home. Principal Johnson listened quietly. I blame myself. I couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. I needed to do something simple, something where I could protect people without the risk of losing them. And you chose to drive a school bus. I chose to take care of children, to make sure they get home safely every day. It's a different kind of mission, but it's still about protecting people. Principal Johnson nodded. And now? Now that everyone knows? Mrs. Rodriguez sighed. I don't know. Maybe it's time for me to leave. No, Principal Johnson said firmly. You're not going anywhere. This community needs you. These children need you. The following days were chaotic. News media began coming to town. The local newspaper wrote a story. Social media posts were made. Mrs. Rodriguez's story began to spread. But the townspeople protected Mrs. Rodriguez. They didn't give much information to the media. They respected her privacy. And the children continued to act the same way. Monday morning, Mrs. Rodriguez came with bus number 47 as usual. Tommy was waiting at the first stop. Good morning, Mrs. Rodriguez, Tommy said as he got on the bus. Good morning, honey, Mrs. Rodriguez said, just like always. When they picked up Sarah, she asked, Mrs. Rodriguez, can you teach us about airplanes? Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. Maybe someday, Sarah. But first, let's focus on getting you to school safely. When Jake got on, he asked, Mrs. Rodriguez, you're still our bus driver, right? You're not leaving. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at Jake through the rearview mirror. Jake, I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong. Months passed. Media attention faded. The town returned to its normal routine. But something had changed. Mrs. Rodriguez was no longer hidden, but still the same caring, dedicated bus driver. Occasionally, veterans would come to school to visit Mrs. Rodriguez. Sometimes young pilots training nearby would come to talk with her, but she always gave the same message. I'm proud of my service, but my mission now is taking care of these children. When spring came, Lincoln Elementary organized a career day. Various professionals came to school to talk to children about different careers, and of course Mrs. Rodriguez was asked to speak about aviation. This time she didn't refuse. Children, she said that day standing in the classroom, flying is amazing. There's nothing like being up in the sky, above the clouds, feeling completely free. The children listened, fascinated. But you know what I learned? The most important flight is not the one that takes you highest or fastest. The most important flight is the one that brings you home safely. Tommy raised his hand. Mrs. Rodriguez, what's the difference between being a pilot and being a bus driver? Mrs. Rodriguez thought for a moment. Tommy, both jobs are about the same thing. Getting people from one place to another safely, whether it's 30,000 feet in the air or 30 miles per hour on the ground, the responsibility is the same. Sarah asked, do you ever want to fly again? Sometimes, Sarah. But then I remember that I have the most important cargo in the world on my bus every day. You. And that's more valuable than any military mission I ever flew. Jake, always the practical one, asked, Mrs. Rodriguez, if there was an emergency, could you still fly a plane? Mrs. Rodriguez smiled mysteriously. Let's hope we never have to find out, Jake. As summer vacation approached, the children organized a surprise party for Mrs. Rodriguez. A simple celebration in the cafeteria, homemade cards, cookies, and small gifts. Mrs. Rodriguez, Tommy said while making a presentation, we want you to know that you're our hero, not because you were a pilot, but because you take care of us every day. Sarah added, you taught us that being a hero doesn't mean you have to wear a uniform or fly jets. You can be a hero just by caring about people. Jake, usually the tough guy, added, you make us feel safe. Every morning when we see you, we know everything's going to be okay. Mrs. Rodriguez, with tears in her eyes, looked at these children she had watched grow up for years. Children, she said, you've taught me something too. You've taught me that home is not a place. Home is where you're needed, and I'm needed here, with you. That summer, Mrs. Rodriguez stayed in town. No vacation to exotic places, no visiting old military friends. She stayed in Cedar Grove, maintained the bus, prepared for the next school year. When fall came, new children began riding the bus. Kindergartners, scared and excited about their first day of school. Mrs. Rodriguez welcomed them with the same patience and care. Don't worry, babies, she said to the new children. Mrs. Rodriguez will take good care of you. And Tommy, Sarah, Jake, now older, wiser, helped reassure the younger children. Don't be scared, Tommy told a nervous kindergartner. Mrs. Rodriguez is the best. She used to fly fighter jets, but now she takes care of us. We're safer with her than anyone else in the world. Years passed. Children grew up, graduated, moved on. New children took their places. Mrs. Rodriguez remained constant, the steady, caring presence who made sure everyone got home safely. Sometimes former students would come back to visit. Tommy, now in high school, sometimes stopped by the bus garage to say hello. Sarah, now interested in engineering, would ask Mrs. Rodriguez about flight mechanics. Jake, planning to join the military after graduation, sought her advice about service. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jake asked one day, do you think I should become a pilot? Mrs. Rodriguez studied this young man she had watched grow from a mischievous boy into a thoughtful teenager. Jake, you should become whatever you're called to be. But remember, the highest honor is not the rank you achieve or the medals you earn. The highest honor is serving others with integrity and compassion. Like you do, like all of us should do, every day in whatever way we can. One afternoon, as Mrs. Rodriguez was finishing her last route, her radio crackled with an emergency call. There had been an accident on the highway. A bus from another school district had broken down in a dangerous area. Children were stranded, and the situation was becoming critical. Mrs. Rodriguez immediately changed course. When she arrived at the scene, She found 20 children from the other schools scared and confused by the roadside. Their bus driver was overwhelmed, and first responders hadn't arrived yet. Without hesitation, Mrs. Rodriguez took charge. She organized the children, assessed the situation, and coordinated with emergency services using her military training. Her calm, authoritative presence immediately settled the children and impressed the other adults on scene. "Ma'am," said the stranded bus driver, "how do you know how to handle all this?" Mrs. Rodriguez, helping a frightened child, looked up. "Experience. Lots of experience." When the children were safely transferred to other buses and the situation was resolved, a state police officer approached Mrs. Rodriguez. "Ma'am, I've never seen a civilian handle an emergency situation like that. What's your background?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "I'm a school bus driver. That's all the background I need." That evening, as Mrs. Rodriguez drove bus number 47 back to the garage, she reflected on her journey. From the cockpit of an F-16 to the driver's seat of a school bus, from Colonel to Mrs. Rodriguez, from war zones to school zones, she had traded the vast sky for daily routes, combat missions for children's safety, military honors for simple gratitude. And somehow, in choosing the smaller stage, she had found the bigger purpose. Her radio crackled with a message from the district office. "Mrs. Rodriguez, thank you for your help today. The families of those children will never forget what you did." Mrs. Rodriguez picked up the radio. "Just doing my job, getting children home safely. That's what I do." As she parked the bus and locked the doors, Mrs. Rodriguez looked up at the evening sky, the same sky she had once flown through at supersonic speeds, the same sky she now checked every morning for weather conditions. The difference was, back then she was protecting her country. Now she was protecting its future, one child at a time, one safe ride at a time, one small act of care at a time. Colonel Maria Rodriguez, call sign Ghost, had found her most important mission, and it didn't require wings to fly. Maria Rodriguez's story teaches us this: true heroism doesn't only happen on battlefields, but also in daily life. Sometimes the greatest service is hidden in the most ordinary jobs. A fighter pilot's most valuable mission might be safely transporting children to school. Have you ever met someone like this? Someone with great achievements who chose to work in ordinary jobs, serving quietly every day? Share their story in the comments, because at Hidden Lives, we know that the greatest heroes sometimes hide in the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, subscribe, share, and help us tell the stories of heroes who continue their hidden lives. See you in the next one. And until then, remember that a bus driver, a security guard, or a custodian passing by might actually have a past that could change your life. Because at Hidden Lives, we know that the biggest secrets are hidden under the most ordinary uniforms.